So last summer we set up these 8 worm bins. This bin here we covered up with a moving blanket. Stored this outside the garage to see what it's like with the worm bin outside versus inside. These ones we've kept in this insulated garage all winter. So currently we're at 45 degrees. This is a soil temperature probe, about 48, almost 50 degrees soil temperature. So the blanket seems to be working at night, keeping it insulated so it doesn't freeze. We do get down to the teens periodically. Daytime highs are usually about 40 to 45 degrees. We're in Southern Oregon. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go through these bins, do a check-in, see what we're seeing now that it is winter time. This will be our winter check-in. So as we peel these back, worms are still down low. I see 1, 2, 3, about 6 worm eggs in here, which is exciting. That's good news. That means the worms laid the eggs in the late fall. So the warmer they are, the more they will reproduce and lay eggs. Worms really like to be soil temperature of 50 to about 70 degrees. They will survive down to 30 degree soil temperature. Anything above freezing, they will survive. They just become inactive and they don't do a whole lot in those cold conditions. So this soil temperature being 50, the worms are just kind of hanging out. There's eggs in here, not seeing any food. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna feed this with some vegetable scraps. Worms like dry, crunchy leaves. So I'm gonna take some leaves and some browns. Outside of our kitchen, we keep a bin full of vegetable scraps. I got a couple young kids, so there's always half-eaten apples laying around the house, banana peels laying around, so we keep all that stuff in this bin. But worms like it all broken down. Another thing I really like are these H2O gloves that we sell. They're waterproof all the way up almost to your wrist, and so they keep all the water and moisture out when you're feeding worms. These are a great glove. We use these all summer in the garden as well. We got eggshells, banana peels, celery, lettuce head. So we're just gonna do a thin layer, make sure it's all broken up. And then we're gonna do some crunched up leaves. The more you can crunch up the leaves, the better, the faster they'll process through it. So try and break it up as much as you can. We're doing a lasagna approach where we do different food layers as we go. Once you put the food in, you wanna cover it with compost. So I'm gonna use some fresh compost here. So we got a fresh layer of compost on the top. We fed half of it. Now we're gonna move the other half over and we're gonna feed the other side. Coffee grounds. We throw the whole filter in. The filters that we use are biodegradable, so they'll just break down. The worms will eat them. Eggshells, we like to use half eggshells in. The worms like to kind of nestle inside of those. We're gonna fill it up with compost at the top. And then last, we're gonna water the top. Since it's cold and wet here, you don't need a whole lot of water. The other thing that we did last year on these bins when we set them up is we put these wooden dowels in. Originally we did 1/2-inch dowels and we found that they were kind of loose and they would move around. So we went back through and we used a 5/8-inch dowel. It makes a huge difference just on viability to get the bin in and out. We put these screens on the side so that air can get in and out. Seem to be holding up well. But definitely recommend this setup. It's been working out great. The other thing that we did in the garage is we used these seed starting mats that we sell. Here's a brand new box of them. Seed starting mats. And this just helps keep the worms warm, it keeps them moving. As long as the soil's warm, they'll continue to eat, reproduce, and you'll get more worm castings, more vermicompost quicker if you keep them working. We use a heat mat controller like this. I connect a multiple strip to this and I'll connect all the heat mats to this one controller. It comes with the probe that you stick into one bin and then it'll keep all your mats at the same temperature. So we got one bin in. The rest of these bins, we're gonna go through all these bins, check them all, feed them, see what we see. So this bin here, the first thing I notice is that the top looks like it's all been eaten out. That means that the worms are hungry. So if you see this where the tops look like something has already gone through the whole top, the worms in here have eaten all the food and they are hungry. Got 1 carrot. But if I peel this back a little bit, let's see what we see. 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 eggs in here. So eggs are a good sign. That means that the worms are happy. They're laying eggs. Each egg is going to have up to 6 baby worms in each egg. So we're going to peel this half back. So we're going to peel this back. Same thing. We're going to do vegetable scraps, browns, compost on top, where we do different layers. That way the worms can come in and go out and go to the different layers and find the food that they like. The other thing is if you come to a bin and there's still food in it, you don't want to feed it again. You want to let the worms eat through all the food before you add more food to it. If you feed them too fast before they have a chance to eat through it, you'll end up with spoilage. You'll end up with a rotten smell in your worm bin. If your worm bin smells, it means that there's decomposing food in there that the worms aren't eating fast enough, or that you overwatered it and the water down at the bottom will turn rancid. So you want to keep an eye out. If you smell something, that means something's going on with the bin. Usually it's overfeeding. People tend to overfeed their worms initially. You want to let them kind of starve out and then feed them. And they'll grow faster that way as well. So we got some leaves. Again, leaves, you want to crunch them up the best you can. The more you help the worms crunch up the food, the faster they'll eat it. The faster they eat it, the faster you will get your worm compost and vermicompost. So each one of these bins, we started each bin with 200 to 300 worms. So that's about a 1/4 pound of worms per bin. And by the time they're full, we'll harvest them out and then we'll put them into fresh dirt and we'll just keep the cycle going. Crunch up your leaves the best you can. And then put the soil back on top of them. Anytime you feed them, you want to cover the worms back up. Just keeps everything sealed in. And then up at the top, you don't need a whole lot of compost, just a little layer on the top. Water. Okay, so this bin here, when I look at the top, I see little fungus gnats crawling around. And you can tell it seems a little wetter than the other bins. So fungus gnats is kind of a regular pest that we deal with in the wintertime indoors, just because it's so wet here in the Pacific Northwest and the worms stay nice and wet. It's a perfect breeding ground for fungus gnats. So what we do is we apply SF nematodes. This is the Steinernema feltiae species. We'll take these, we'll water them into the soil. The nematodes will coexist with the red worms. So there's no harm that you're going to kill the worms by introducing these nematodes. Nematodes go after like 200 different species of soil-dwelling pests. So whether you have Japanese beetles, cutworms, lawn grubs, ticks, fleas, use them everywhere on the farm. We use them on our grasses, we use them in our pastures, in the garden, we use them inside the house. So to apply nematodes, it's super easy. Take a bucket of water. The amount of water isn't critical. You can use a gallon of water. You can use 5 gallons of water. Just depends on how many bins you're going to try and feed it into. Typically 5 million. A gallon is good for 5 million. You can dilute it further if you need to. So we're going to take these nematodes, cut them open, dump them in. Again, nice thing about these gloves is they're waterproof, so you can swish them around. These are completely safe to use around kids, animals, pets. You can handle them with your bare hands. There's no risk that you're going to get infected with these nematodes. We are permitted to ship them to all 48 continental states by the USDA APHIS. So it's wide open on using those for organic farming. So I just applied a little bit in here. It doesn't take a lot. The nice thing about using nematodes is they're a living organism. So they're going to move around this soil and they're going to attack any fungus gnats that come in. The other thing that we have is we have fungus gnat traps. So since I know there's kind of an active infestation in this one here, I'm going to apply a sticky trap into it just to safeguard against any adults. So we got these little sticky traps. We also sell full card sticky traps and extra large sticky traps for greenhouse growers. But these little ones are nice for indoor houses, or this, we only have about 3-4 inches of space. And they come in different designs. You got mushrooms, you got plants. So we're gonna take one of these. You just peel off the card on both sides, and then we're just gonna stick it nice and low in there. Get it to stand straight up and down. So we'll stick it in there like that, and then that will just help catch some of the adults, help kill them off faster. Eventually the SF nematodes will attack the developing fungus gnats in the soil. They go after the immature stages, but the traps will attack the adults living up on the tops. So these worms here are pretty close to the top. Got eggs down a little bit lower. And this one here seems a little wet. So this bin has been a little too wet, probably why we got fungus gnats. So on this one, I'm gonna give them extra browns. The browns will help fix the pH level in the soil. So we'll just do a light feed on this one and then do a heavy feed on the browns. Move them in there. Okay, so now we'll feed this side here. So when you come across a worm that's got a big fat band on him, that means he's a breeder. He's ready to lay eggs. So you can kind of see how your worms are doing just by what you see. If you see a lot of real skinny worms with no bands, it could be a sign that they need more food. Ultimately, you want to see them mating. You want to see two worms connected. They kind of grab onto each other and turn into a knot. If you see connecting worms, that means that you're doing a good job and the worms are happy, they're mating. The more mating worms, the faster you'll get to that 100 pounds of compost that we're trying to get to. And then when you're done, it's always best to do a thin layer of compost up at the top. Just covers everything up. We like to use mushroom compost. So we use EB Stone here on the West Coast. EB Stone's got a good organic mushroom compost. It's pretty inexpensive. I think I got this bag at Daisy Hubbard's. Okay, so we're gonna leave this sticky trap in here. They're fed, they're watered, put them back up onto the tray. I'll come back around and connect the heating mats back up here when we're done. Okay, same story on this one. Looks like the worms are all up at the top. Looks like they've ate through pretty much all the food. Vegetable scraps and then leaves. Sometimes in the year, leaves are harder to get, so you may have to buy some straw, sort of another brown that you can use to mix in there. Because if you just do vegetable scraps every time, you're gonna raise the acidity level too high. The pH level will get too high in your soil and it'll start to spoil. And you could have an issue where your worms are running away trying to get out of there because they don't like the soil. Okay, cover up the top. Water. So there you have it. We got our worm bins all fed. Middle of wintertime check-in. So we'll do a check-in in March and see how these worms are doing. If you keep them warm, you keep them fed, keep your moisture in check. Wintertime, don't overwater them. You'll have worms year-round. Buy worms, reproduce them, put them out into the garden, get vermicompost. There's so many things you can do with worm on a homestead. We feed them to our chickens. So if you keep a healthy, happy colony of worms, they'll continue to reproduce and you can use them throughout the whole growing season. Thanks for checking in and happy growing.